we are back with Dr. John Tickell, and this time we are broaching the subject of vaccines, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to cover all facets of it in the time that we have. But since the beginning of COVID and the development of the COVID vaccines, regardless of which company you think of in regards to those vaccines, it has brought the pro-vaccine and anti-vaccine topic to the forefront of conversation for everybody. Where do you sit in that debate?
Natalie, it depends whether you depends on valid scientific research or whether you believe anti-vaxxers who are usually experts at social media and talking fake words about vaccines causing various diseases, especially autism. So
here's the first question I have for you. If you look into the anti-vax movement, there are a lot of it is made up of parents who say that their children have been irreversibly damaged by vaccines. Do you not think that they have a valid reason to voice their concerns and their experiences?
They have a valid reason to voice their concerns. They then need to become part of a scientific research trial. And the biggest ridiculous fraudulent report in 1998 did a series of not 1,200 children, 12 children, which were cherry-picked. And they did this big report in the Lancet magazine, which 9 months later was totally refuted by 10 of the 12 authors because the research, the ridiculous research on 12 children had been funded by a law firm who was in a lawsuit against the vaccination companies. I mean, those people were charged with, and it's called ethical failure. So if a parent says that my child had a little red mark or got an itch from a vaccination, I believe them. If they say they got part of the autism spectrum, you say, okay, now line up another 200 mothers or parents who have said the same thing, and then we'll compare them with a control group and we'll do a valid scientific study. So when the first fraudulent study came out in 1998, that's 23 years ago, there's not been one valid scientific researched, peer-reviewed study that's come up with the same answer.
Okay, so and you're talking about the study that Dr. Andrew Wakefield was a part of. Are you aware of who Dr. Andrew Zimmerman is?
I am.
So Dr. Zimmerman was obviously a very highly respected doctor. I have to read his qualifications, and these aren't all of them, but this is for the people that aren't aware of who he is. He studied at Princeton and Columbia University. He worked at Johns Hopkins and Harvard Medical School. He was pediatric neurology at Mass General. He was an organizer for Autism and Immunology Conference for Autism Speaks. He was a multi-award winner. He released an affidavit in 2018 about his role in the omnibus proceedings. So most people use the omnibus proceedings as proof that there is no link between autism and vaccines. Now, Dr. Zimmerman released an affidavit in 2018 about his role in those proceedings, where he said that he was an expert witness for the Department of Justice. He claimed that he informed the Department of Justice that there is a link between a subset of children and vaccine-injured children developing autism-like features and suffering regressive, I always get this word wrong, encephalopathy. Did I say that correctly?
You did. Yeah, good.
So he claimed that after alerting the DOJ, he was not invited back into the courtroom, and that his remarks about the first case in the omnibus proceedings, which were specifically about that first case, were used as a blanket statement. And he had made it clear to the DOJ that it was not a blanket statement he had made, but case specific. So since then, people have sort of picked Dr. Zimmerman apart, but how does a person who's been so highly respected as a medical professional and expert go from being a hero to suddenly being demonized when he speaks out against vaccines?
It's like any vociferous person who doesn't have a valid peer-reviewed trial. The next question you ask is, who's backing him? Why is he saying it? Like the Wakefield was called out when he and the 12 authors admitted that they were being funded by a law firm and they were doing it for financial gain. So why don't we ask Dr. Zimmerman why he's so vociferous about it, and where are the studies that he's using to say that this is happening? And don't forget autism. The diagnosis of autism differs all over the world, depending on which. My oldest son is a paediatrician. So he has now decided not to diagnose autism because the symptoms, signs, reference points are so vague that you can go from one doctor to the next, and one doctor says, oh, your child has autism. The next doctor says your child is in the autism spectrum. The next doctor says, no, I can't find any problems, challenges, which I could put in that box of autism. It's a bit like going to a physiotherapist and saying, I've got the flu. Now, can the physiotherapist in that consultation Google all the reviews, because physiotherapists don't know anything about the flu? So because somebody is qualified, you still have to have peer review. Let's talk about the World Health Organization and UNICEF. UNICEF started in 1946. It had 109 countries were members of UNICEF, which came from the United Nations. They have done research now from 1946 to, how many years is that? 80 years. And they say there is not one valid peer-reviewed study in the world ever that has shown a positive link between vaccination and autism. So do you believe Dr. Zimmerman, or do you believe UNICEF?
This isn't about what I believe, and I understand that that's just a rhetorical question being put out to people, but something else that I wanted to talk about that was a part of the omnibus proceedings was...
The other answer, I'm going to butt in here because I'm very rude. Would you like to spend the next 3 hours going through polio, measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, tetanus, tuberculosis and chickenpox and looking at the death rates from 1950 to now? I mean, polio has been wiped out by vaccine. Smallpox has been wiped out by vaccine. The only virus lately that they haven't been able to get a vaccine against is HIV, AIDS. But the antidotes, viral antidotes, have at least cut AIDS back from being a death sentence to be, yeah, you can still live. So this latest flurry about COVID, and now there are 4 approved vaccines in the world, the negatives are, oh, they haven't taken long enough, you know. I say, so what's the worst thing about me having a jab for COVID, which I've had? And by the way, that's a stupid word, jab. I just had a little scratch. Anyway, I've had it. Now, I got a little red thing there and I got a bit itchy. So that's called a side effect. Have I got autism? Am I depressed? Am I anxious? Have I got cancer? No. Oh, no, but you'll have to wait 10 years. So the risks of dying of COVID versus the risks of getting anything serious from a vaccination, they're chalk and cheese. So let's look at the numbers over the last 50 years that vaccines have saved 3 million, this UNICEF, 3 million lives a year for 50 years. That is 150 million lives.
Okay, but let's go back to the omnibus proceeding, and this is where I was going. So during that proceeding, which, as we've already stated, is used as proof that there is no link between autism and vaccination, Hannah polling was a case that the US government conceded on, and there was never a final ruling in that case. They ended up settling, and they settled for $1.5 million and $500,000 every year to the polling family for care for Hannah. So the government's never conceded that the link was there, but this is a landmark settlement that people believe will reach about 20 million in payout by the end of it. And her father, Hannah's father, John Poling, he's a neurologist himself, and he is pro-vax. But even he has come out and said it is irrefutable that the vaccines, and I believe it was the MMR that caused this. So my question then becomes, even though it may be rare, do parents not have the right to question and make decisions when there is risk? It may be minimal, but there is still the possibility of risk.
Well, it depends whether that parent who's anti-science wants to, and by the way, you're quoting one case in 50,000 million. It depends whether a parent wants to take the risk of their child dying from whooping cough or spreading the virus whooping cough to other kids. So it's about like you getting in your car tomorrow and saying, now listen, I don't think I should drive my car, I should walk because I might kill someone. So we're talking about level of risk here. So you're talking about one case with a patient. You could go back to the pesticides and say, well, Monsanto, who were bought by the German company, they've had to pay out billions for spraying poisons on your food. But still, most people say, I don't know, it's only a little bit of poison. But poisons bioaccumulate in your body. And 50% of the pesticides in your body happen when you're a kid and they bioaccumulate. So when you're talking about risk, you've got to look at you letting your son play football and getting a busted knee and having arthritis the rest of his life versus the 10,000 who don't bust their knees. So you get back to risk versus reward.
Okay, so in risk versus reward, with any medical procedure, and a lot of doctors will concede that with any medical procedure, there is risk. There is always risk. There is always a possibility for something to go wrong. When I was growing up, and I'm sure when you were growing up, the measles and chickenpox were not scary things to catch. I know I certainly had both. My sisters had mumps, and I also had German measles. And if anything, the parents would send their children around to the neighbour's house so that if one of the kids had measles, all of the kids got measles at the same time. You would stay home, you wouldn't go out, you would get over it, and then you've developed lifelong immunity. And from the things that I have read, measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, they will kill you if you are deficient in nutrients. So in third world countries, absolutely it is a concerning thing, but is it really that concerning in first world countries where we do have great hygiene and nutrients?
That's an amazing statement. We've got good nutrients. We've got them.
Nutrition, sorry.
No, hang on. So you're just putting to one side the fact that 21 million kids died from measles every year. 21 million a year. So you put that to one side. You're putting to one side.
What countries were they from? So this is what I'm asking you. Were they from first world countries, or were they from third world countries where nutrition and hygiene and all of those things play a bigger part?
Well, I'll give you one example. After the Wakefield fast course printed in the Lancet magazine, which was refuted a few months later, there was an outbreak of measles in the UK, which killed a lot of children. And then there were outbreaks in Canada and the US, and they were all put down to non-vaccinated kids. So once again, when you look at risk and reward, it's the same as going to the airport and getting on a plane. I mean, people lose their lives in plane crashes every year, but we still fly on planes. So vaccinations, this is the United Nations, UNICEF, 109 countries. Vaccinations have saved more lives than any other medical intervention in history, and more disabilities. All the kids with polio, disabled forever. There's none. Since 1990, no polio. So once again, you're going to listen to scientific fact on research of hundreds and thousands of people, or you're going to listen to one case.
Okay, so like I said at the beginning of this, we don't have a lot of time, but I do want to finish on this last question. So in 2020, a study published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health found that unvaccinated children are far healthier than vaccinated children. Now, this went viral when it was first released, and many people have come out and disputed those findings. But here's the question. If it's true that vaccinated children are far healthier than unvaccinated children, why will the CDC, the Department of Health and Human Services, or the NIH not run a study to prove that that is the case? Because if they did, that could quash this argument tomorrow. And the other point I wanted to make with that, I understand that some would say, well, that's an unethical study to run. But the fact is there are plenty of people that are already refusing to vaccinate their children that would probably be willing to sign their children up for such a study. So would it not just be smart for them to run the test, run the study, prove it unequivocally, and then the argument cannot be had anymore?
So you're talking about a study on unvaccinated children, which theoretically are healthier, right? And so
this is what the study said.
Yeah, the study. And the study had how many, a group of how many did they study?
I don't have that in my notes, and I'm not sure. It was apparently a 10-year study from one medical practice. Like I said, I'm not saying that this is correct information, but my question is around the debate. Would it not be smart for the NIH, the CDC, or Health and Human Services to run a similar study where they can control get a good number of people, a good cross-section of the community, and prove that vaccinated is healthier than non-vaccinated?
Okay, how long is the study going to last? The study proved this. I mean, did it last for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 2 years? Or
the study that was in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, that was apparently run over 10 years.
Mm-hmm. So I want to know how many people. And last question, what was the control group that they compared them against? There's no valid study unless you have a similar number of a control group. So you can believe that if you like, but why don't you answer me this question? Mm-hmm. If you have children and vaccinations have saved 500 million kids over the last 50 years, why wouldn't you vaccinate them?
That's a question for everybody to answer. Yeah.
And one more. Could you ask all the women out there in TV land, were they prepared to not be vaccinated against rubella, German measles, because that limits back to zero, no birth defects, no stillbirths? It's a bit like thalidomide. Thalidomide was fine, right? And thousands of kids are born with no limbs. So rubella now has been proven to cause birth defects, premature births, and stillbirths. So you're okay now. You're not going to vaccinate yourself against that. I think that's very sad. Dr.
John Tickell, like I said at the beginning of this, I always love a good debate. Thank you so much for being a good sport and going through this very controversial topic with me. And I look forward to having you on The Informer again.
Natalie, thank you. You said it's good sport. It's life. It's the game. We are playing the game of life. It's not a sport.